All right, I haven't done a Word 500 for a while, so I thought I'd do one of these again. If you're not familiar with Word 500, this is like Wordle, except instead of getting the colors next to, the letters aren't going to be colored actually on them. What we're going to get is off to the right, we're going to get the number of greens, the number of yellows, and then the number of reds or blacks or grays, depending on which version of Wordle you're using. But so we don't know which letters. We might get two green, two yellow, right? We don't know which letters are green and which ones are yellow. And so it's a little bit, well, not a little bit, it's a lot different, but it's very interesting. If you haven't tried it, try it out. And, you know, link in the description, all that jazz, and you can just try it along with me too if you want to. But I'm going to go back to the old nasty start. That was my first starting word way back in the day on Wordle. And let's just go for it. Okay, so there's one yellow. So there's one of those letters in the word. Okay, cool. Let's do. Let's follow up with. Let's go with new letters. I'm gonna follow up with my Euler, nasty Euler. That was my kind of 2-word start. Okay, so we've got one letter from nasty, 3 from Euler. This is really good. Now I'm gonna try starting to get which letters. Figure out which letters. So let's do. Let's do something like, we could do raise. Now, that's not going to be the answer. The problem with that, there's a lot of problems. This is the problem with Word 500, is you're like, oh, I'll try this. But then if I'm not going to know which ones are the ones, and, so... I don't know. Let's just do that anyways. Let's just get some information. Okay. So we only got 2 letters from there. So we could have an A or an S. It's interesting, you know, if there's an E in the word, so certainly could be, but at this point, the E can't be 4th or 5th, which is where it's most likely to be. So, you know, odds are telling me E is probably not one of the letters because we would have gotten a green, but not necessarily. And we've done R at the beginning and the end. So again, same kind of thing. We could do an R second. We could do something like a TR now. That could be interesting. Let's do Trump because check some new letters. Also, if we get a yellow or a green, we'll know it's the T or the R. I think that's the bet. I should have done something more like that instead of raise last because now we know 2 letters, but we don't know which ones. Okay, so there's a T or an R. A T or an R. So if it's the T, then it's the one in nasty, right? If it's the R, then it's one of them in Euler and in raise. So, but we still haven't found it. So again, if it's the R, it's got to be 3rd or 4th. It's getting more and more unlikely that there's an R. So I'm going to assume T. Maybe we could put a T at the end. T at the end would be good. But if we're doing a T, then we can't do an R. So, if there's not an R and there is a T, if that's true, then the other 2 yellows in raise have to be I and E. Okay, so can we do something like this? Debit? Again, I don't think that can be the answer. No. Right? Because you'd have the T, you'd have the E and the I, you'd have to have an O or an L. Legit is possible though. Legit is a legit possible answer because we would have the I, L, and E from Euler, the T from nasty, the E and I in raise, the T in Trump. That's pretty good. That's actually a possible answer. Okay, it's not even close. Okay, well, okay, let's unpack this. So what we know now, remember what we said. If I forgot you can click on these and actually mark them. But if, let's go ahead and do that. Let's say this was the yellow. That's what we were assuming, right? Therefore, there can't be an R. So the R is red. Therefore, the 2 yellows in, I said the 2 yellows in raise have to be the I and the E. That is not actually no, it is true. Because the A and the S can't be in there because we said the T. So the I and the E would have to be in there, but we only got the 1 green. So if there is a T right? Okay, let's go back to, okay. I'm gonna stop clicking on those. If there is a T in the word at all, then it has to be the green there, right? Because we didn't get any yellows. So if there's a T in the word, it has to be the green, in which case it was the yellow in Trump, in which case there's no R, in which case you have to have an E and an I. It doesn't work. There cannot be a T. The T is definitely one of the reds. Okay, so then either the yellow is the R, or it's one of these new letters, which we did have 4 of the letters from Nasty and Euler, so we could have a U, M, or P. I'm inclined to sort of assume it's the R at this point. In which case, if there is an R, that's one of the yellows in rays. So we can only have one of I or E. We could have actually... Is it possible to have the R and not the I or the E? And the A or the S is one of the yellows. It's possible. It's possible. You'd have to have the R, L, and O. R, O, and L, and an A or an S. In which case the L could be the green. The L could be the green. Oh, legit. Yeah, legit was a legit answer. Okay, yeah, never mind. The L could be the green. There's no E or I. We have an R and an O and an A or an S. R-O-L. O-O-L-O. R has to be third or fourth, because it's been yellow every time. No, we can't do Loris. We can't do, and the S would have to be, S can't be third or fourth. But if the L's at the beginning, it's not LS, so the S would have to be at the end. Something RS like this, or LO RS or ORS. Oh, I don't think this is gonna work with the L at the beginning. Unless the R isn't the yellow. Unless the R isn't the yellow in Trump. We could have no R. We could have, let's see, could we do like an OU, but then what comes between the L and the O? Okay, so we could still have, man, this is tricky. I want to assume the L is the green, but if there's no R, we have L, we need to have maybe I and E. We could do I and E. L-I-E from Euler. The I and the E would be for rays. We would need an N or a Y then, because we couldn't have an A or an S. Y not at the end is unlikely. We could do an N at the end. Okay, so then we have I and E, and we need a U, M, or P. But if we do the L, we can't do the E and the I. From legit. And if you can't do the E and the I, then it's L, R, and O. So there has to be, if the L is at the beginning, there is an R. L at the beginning means there is an R, but I couldn't figure out how to make it work, so maybe no L. Maybe no L at the beginning. Okay, so it's possible it's the E or the I that's in the right spot, right? Otherwise, the G. What if we had like GRY? The R would be the yellow in Trump. The G would be the green and legit. There's still no I or E though, so then we have to have an L. Oh, right. The G can't be the green. The G can't be the green. If the G or the T. If the G or the T were the green, we figured out the T for a different reason, but if the G or the T is the green, then there's no L, E, or I. But if there's no L, E, or I, you only have O and R up here, and you need to have 3 yellows. So this actually has to be a red as well. So it's the E or the I think, because I don't think it works for it to be the L. Let's go with the E for now as the the green. So it's the yellow in both of these. We could have an R now. ER. But we can't have an I or an L. Actually, we can't have an I or an L. So knowing, we'll just continue the logic that some of you are probably already yelling at the screen, because I should have just continued from what I figured out with the G and the T. Therefore, one of the L, E, or I is the green. Therefore, it is the only one of those three that's even in the word. E, L, and I, only one of those three is in there. There is an R and an O. Guaranteed. This R is the yellow. This R is yellow there. This R is yellow here. There is an O. It is yellow. Okay, and that is the one yellow in here. So there's no U, M, or P. Okay. Now we're getting somewhere. And we can only have one of I or, and we definitely have, well, unless there's an L, we definitely have one of I and E, which means A and S are probably red. Unless the L is the green, there's no A or S, which means either we have a Y not at the end or we have an N not at the beginning. N not at the beginning is more likely. So we could do something. Heron, I believe is a legit guess. There we go. All right. Well, it took quite a bit of thinking. Maybe I was being a little slow with some of the logic. Let me know if you were way ahead of me on the logic, didn't keep up with what I was saying, didn't understand which way it was. And if you did today's Word 500, let me know how it went for you and how many guesses it took. And of course, be sure to subscribe for more.